if we don't think people are important, then what do we think is important? I guess that's what I'm saying.
It's not necessarily that we don't think people are important, but if evolution is real, and if there is this constant,
it real?
I don't know, but it's visible. Like you can measure it in certain animals.
You can measure adaptation.
Yeah.
But there's no evidence that in fact, I think we've kind of given up on the idea of evolution. The theory of evolution as articulated by Darwin is like kind of not true. Right?
In what sense?
Well, in the most basic sense, the idea that, all life emerged from a single cell organism and over time, and there would be a fossil record of that, and there's not. And
there's not a fossil record of transitionary species, like species that are adapting to its environment.
There's
and they
tons of record of adaptation, and you see it in your own life. But no, there's no evidence at all zero, that, people, evolve seamlessly from a single cell amoeba. No, there's not. There's no chain in the fossil record of that at all. And that's why you don't actually hear you hear them make reference to evolution, because the theory of adaptation is obviously true. But Darwin's theory's totally that's why it's still a theory almost 200 years later. No, we have not found that at all. And I can't even guess. I mean, I have my own theories on it, but they're not proven.
What are your theories?
God created people, distinctly, and animals. I mean, I think what every person on Earth thought until the mid-19th century, actually.
Right, but
it's not a new idea.
Science has taught this to us as though it's a foregone conclusion that we all must believe. That's one thing that I've really realized doing this channel. The emperor has no clothes. They don't have the science that they claim that they have for us to unquestionably accept this dogma.
That's the Big Bang model. It is true. There's no point in doubting the Big Bang model, okay? We don't let people up here on stage if they doubt that part of the Big Bang model.
If you want to believe in abiogenesis, if you want to believe in Darwinian evolution, if you want to believe in galaxy formation, planet formation, if you want to believe that, that's fine. But because it flies in the face of logic and the laws of physics, I would want to see considerably better evidence than what they have. There's no God in evolutional belief system, it's evidence. Would you like to come on and tell me the evidence? I'm going to invite you on.
Hello?
Hey.
So what exactly is, your point against evolution? I'd like to hear it.
My point is that Darwinian evolution posits that life began to be, over time, increase in function was garnered or was created by random mutations. And eventually you get something like the brain and eyeballs. Have I misrepresented your belief system?
No.
Okay.
No.
So that to me is an exorbitant claim. That is the kind of claim where if I told you something similar but the Bible, you'd go, I want to see really strong evidence of that. I was a child, it was a long time ago, and I was taught that science had figured this out. I have a 9-year-old. I don't want him taught from the people that he trusts that they know this happened, which they don't. And a lot of their evidences have recently fallen by the wayside. It's a theory that's not aging well, neither of them.
The James Webb Telescope has identified 6 galaxies that exist 500 million years after the Big Bang that are up to 10 times bigger than the Milky Way galaxy. That shouldn't happen. There should not be primordial galaxies that are bigger than the Milky Way galaxy that are only 500 million years old. Something is wrong. We may have to revise our theory of the creation of the universe.
I take umbrage with the scientific complex, academia, scholarship, pop science, media science, telling the children this happened.
And I say to the grown-ups, if you want to deny evolution and live in your world that's completely inconsistent with everything we observe in the universe, that's fine. But don't make your kids do it, because we need them.
We need them.
If they said, scientists believe, this is what science is pointing to, we could be wrong. And you know what? Good science is rigorously skeptical. And so what we tell you children is this is the best that we've done so far. And look, it could be totally wrong. So what I want you all to do as little young minds is go do better science than us, prove us wrong, and come up with a better theory. That is not what they do. That's my issue.
Okay, I understand. So what do you think about fossils? How do you think those came around?
What do you think about fossils? How do you think they came around? They works perfectly in my model.
Oh, how about
how are fossils formed?
Dead animals over crazy periods of time in
Nope.
What do you think they're formed by?
I know what they're formed by.
What are they?
I'm going to use the American Natural History Museum.
Millions of years ago, this dinosaur was going about his normal daily life, but his day went from good to bad. Really bad. After he died, other dinosaurs ate him, and the rest of his skin and muscles rotted away, leaving just his bones. These were quickly buried by mud. Most dinosaur fossils we find belong to animals that were living near to a lake or a river. They died, and a short while later the area flooded, covering the remains in mud and silt.
Okay, so what happens is that basically before they can be scavenged proper, ripped apart, disarticulated, they're covered in mud. Somebody said earlier the fish float, which is true. When fish die, they float. You need fish to be buried in mud. How does this happen? So the question you asked me was how do you explain fossils? A massive mud situation, because there's fossils everywhere. They say like, oh, most fossils are by rivers. That's not true. There's fossils everywhere. There's fossils on mountains. There's fossils in deserts. There's fossils of dinosaurs everywhere. The scenario that he has here, where a dinosaur's taking a shit, falls over dead, and then mud falls on him, is unlikely. That is a silly story. It's a creation myth. And the reason they don't say, well, this dinosaur was doing its thing and a giant wave of mud captured it, is that sounds like a flood. And when you start talking about dinosaurs being found all over the earth, that sounds like a global flood.
Okay. Yeah. You know, that's probably the most, that's a good point. I will have to look into that.
The issue then isn't how do I think fossils were formed, which is the question you asked. I think fossils were formed in the flood. The issue is, when were fossils formed? That's the actual question. How do we date the fossils? Well, fossils are not radioactive, so they don't have half-lives, and you cannot radiometrically date them. Also, in theory, fossils are so old, you cannot carbon date them. If you assume that dinosaurs are 75 million years old, well then, if science were to find soft tissues in dinosaur bones, that would probably kind of bring the whole thing into question, wouldn't you think? A 75 million year old fossil that was replaced by minerals called permineralization shouldn't have soft tissues. Guess what they find in dinosaur bones now? Soft tissues, blood vessels, keratin, vascular systems. I believe how fossils were formed, which was in a global flood, a major flood event. I think their dating is wrong. I think it's radiometric dating based on stratigraphy. I think that there's assumptions there that are incorrect. And in my model, the dinosaurs died much more recently than 75 million years, which if we were to find dinosaur bones, they should have soft tissues, and they do.
Okay. I've never heard of the soft tissues thing. That's interesting.
Do you want to hear about it? It's really cool.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Sweet. So it really upsets me that you haven't heard about it, because you're a young, intelligent individual. And to me, this is the greatest paleontologic find in the history of paleontology. You know, they'll jump on anything pro-evolution. You know, oh, we found this thing, Archaeopteryx and Pakicetus and whatever, Tiktaalik, these proof. But then they find soft tissues in dinosaur bones, and they don't tell anybody. That's good science.
What happened next happened by mistake. Mary put some fragments of the bone in acid to dissolve away the outermost layer of mineral. But the acid worked too fast, and all the mineral dissolved away. Being a fossil, there should have been nothing left. But there was, and it was elastic, like living tissue.
This is the piece.
No. She showed us video she took under the microscope.
That's really what happened?
Yes. That's the dinosaur bone?
Without mineral now. That's what was left.
It looked like the soft tissue she would have expected to find if it had been modern bone. This was impossible. This bone was 68 million years old.
So you see this and you think, what?
Mary Schweitzer, you have just made potentially the most profound discovery in the history of paleontology. You should win a Nobel Prize. You should be venerated as a true scientist. Mary Schweitzer, you found this. What were you thinking?
And you think, what? You
I didn't want to tell anybody.
You'd be ridiculed, right? In sample after sample, they were there. Things that looked suspiciously like flexible, transparent blood vessels. She finally mustered the courage to tell Jack.
Do you understand the problem, my friend?
Yeah, I see it
You see
now.
the problem? I didn't want to tell anybody. Why? Because I'd be ridiculed. Why would you be ridiculed? You just made a phenomenal discovery that's going to be in every textbook. You were going to be the hero of science. That's not how this works. We live in the world of science, where the most remarkable discovery that you still haven't heard about, you're in school, you're going to school for this, and instead of hearing about the amazing discovery Mary Schweitzer said, she was afraid to tell anybody, and it's not being told to anyone. You know why? Because if dinosaurs were here 30,000, 50,000, 20,000, 8,000 years ago, the whole house of cards crumbles. They cannot have this information out. This is why you don't know about it and why they're not talking about it. But since then, they have found this in countless dinosaur fossils, including an individual named Mark Armitage. He discovered soft tissue in a triceratops horn. He wrote a paper in Ad Historia, whatever. It's a very venerated paleontologic peer-reviewed paper that he had found this. The school that he worked at, the University of California, Northridge, fired him because he believed in the Bible and they didn't want his religious dogma taught in the school. He never said a word to the school. He never said a word to his teachers or his students. He just made a paper. He sent the paper out, was entirely scientific about it. They fired him, to which he sued them and won a 6-figure lawsuit for unlawful termination. Yeah. No wonder Mary Schweitzer was afraid to say anything about it. Now, we know where fossils come from. They're rapidly buried in mud. We know when that happened, or do we? Well, I would argue we don't know. And if you tried to stop them and tell them they're younger than we think, you could get fired. Like, imagine being a scientist and then finding out that you can't be a scientist anymore because you got blacklisted for finding something that didn't agree with the official narrative. We are in a new secular scientific religion that people don't necessarily realize, that just like you couldn't question the Catholic Church 200 years ago, you can't question them today. Like Galileo or Copernicus couldn't come to the church and say, hey, the earth isn't in the center, because he was ostracized. We're in the same situation today, but in the reverse. It's wild. And nobody knows about it.